She was summoned to the top floor, expecting to lose everything. But what she heard changed everything she thought she knew about herself. Ellie Jennings was never meant to stand in the spotlight. She was the quiet one, the steady one, the kind of woman who gives more than she takes and asks for nothing in return, but in a single moment, one mistake she didn't make threatened to take away everything she had spent years building. And then someone powerful said 4 words that turned her world upside down. "I want to marry her." What would you do? If your name became a scandal overnight, if your past came back to haunt the person you loved, if you were given a choice to disappear or finally be seen. This is not just a love story. It's a story about truth, sacrifice, and the quiet kind of courage that changes everything. If this story moves you, let us know in the comments. It helps more people find the light in quiet voices just like Ellie's. Now, lean in. Let me tell you how it all began. She had never been summoned to the executive floor before. And, if she was being honest, she didn't expect to return the same way she came in. The elevator groaned as it climbed past the 12th floor beyond the familiar levels where she lived most of her working life, the admin offices, the design studios, the client conference rooms that still smelled faintly of burnt coffee and dry erase markers. Up here, the air was different, too clean, too quiet. Eleanor Ellie Jennings, 32, wasn't used to silence like this, not the kind that felt like it could hear your heartbeat. Mondays usually didn't bother her. She liked routine. Woke at 6:45, had her oatmeal by 7:00, caught the 7:15 bus. Stepped into the Whitmore & Co. lobby at 7:40 sharp, first one in. Always. Her days were measured in emails, ink cartridges, sticky notes, and the quiet rhythm of reliability. She liked her place behind the curtain, but not this Monday. This Monday came with a red flag email, a calendar alert she hadn't set herself, and a summons to the 21st floor of the executive suite, and it came after a mistake, one she hadn't even noticed until it was too late. She held the printed version of the Henderson proposal tight to her chest, her fingers still smudged with toner. Somewhere in its pages was a misaligned column of figures, old data, accidentally reused on a contract worth over $3 million. It was her fault, or at least it had her name on it. That was enough. The elevator chimed. Floor 21. Ellie stepped out into stillness. Polished marble gleamed under her flats. Floor 2 ceiling glass windows let in the Charleston autumn light, warm and golden, casting long shadows across clean, modern lines. It was beautiful up here, cold, but beautiful. A receptionist, too put together to be real, gave her a practiced smile. "Ms. Jennings, they're waiting for you. Not just Henry Whitmore." Her stomach tightened. Her cardigan suddenly felt too thin. The glass conference room at the end of the hall stood like a stage, waiting for its next scene. Ellie saw Lucille Whitmore before she stepped in, white hair immaculate, a pearl pin on her lapel, sitting perfectly still like the room had been built around her. Ellie entered quietly, clutching the proposal and the resignation letter folded neatly inside her notebook. Her breath shallow, her hands cold. Lucille didn't look up. "You're late?" Ellie glanced at her watch. She was 2 minutes early. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said anyway. Lucille finally lifted her gaze, and Ellie felt the full weight of it, cool, appraising, and not entirely unfamiliar. It was the look of someone deciding whether you were worth polishing or discarding. "I've reviewed the Henderson file," Lucille said calmly, standing to walk toward the windows. "Sloppy, amateur, embarrassing." Ellie swallowed. "It was my mistake." I'm not here for an explanation," Lucille interrupted. "I'm here because my son refuses to see what's obvious." Ellie's heart stuttered. Excuse me." Lucille turned slowly, hands folded in front of her. Her voice was soft, but it didn't need volume to strike deep. "You're not from our world, Miss Jennings, and that's not your fault. But when people like you rise too far, you cast shadows you don't mean to, and you attract attention Henry doesn't need." "I didn't ask for attention," Ellie replied, voice thin. "No," Lucille said, "but you accepted it. Quiet girls who keep their heads down still have ambitions, and they leave fingerprints on documents, on reputations, on people." Ellie's face flushed, but she said nothing. She felt 15 again in the counselor's office, being told she'd never make it past sophomore year, or 20, being told she'd never be able to carry a full-time job and care for her sister, or 27, when someone whispered she was just another temp with a nice smile and nothing else to offer. Lucille took a step closer. Her voice dropped. "I won't watch my son's name get tangled in a scandal, no matter how quiet, how polite, how sorry it looks." Ellie's hand moved toward her notebook. She pulled out the folded resignation, the ink still fresh. "If it helps protect his name," she said quietly, "I'll go." Lucille didn't answer. The silence stretched. Then the door opened. Ellie turned, instinctively straightening her posture. Henry Whitmore entered, tall and steady in a slate-gray suit, his presence filling the room effortlessly. His dark eyes scanned the space, first his mother, then Ellie. When his eyes met hers, something shifted. He didn't look surprised, or disappointed, or furious. He looked calm, intent, as if he'd expected to find her there, as if he'd come for her. He walked forward, not fast, but with purpose. He didn't speak right away. Just studied her face, her stiff shoulders, the way she tried not to crumble under his mother's judgment. Lucille folded her arms, watching them both. Ellie held her breath, still clutching the letter, not sure if she should give it or tear it up. And then Henry stopped in front of her. His voice was low, steady, and the words he spoke next would stop everything. Not just the meeting, not just the day, but the story everyone thought they already knew. Ellie had prepared for an ending, but what she heard sounded dangerously like a beginning. The room didn't move. The air didn't stir. Even Lucille Whitmore remained still, as if her spine were carved in marble. Only Henry moved. He walked past his mother with quiet purpose, stopping in front of Ellie. Not too close, not too far. Just close enough for her to feel the warmth of someone who had made up his mind. Ellie gripped the resignation letter tighter, the edges digging into her fingers. "Mother," Henry said, his tone measured but not cold. "You shouldn't have summoned her up here like this." Lucille didn't flinch. "It's a professional matter." "No," he replied. "It's personal, and you know it." Ellie's breath caught. Henry turned to face her fully now, his voice softer. "Ellie didn't make a mess. The system did. That error in the contract came from a backup file our architect uploaded by mistake. She flagged it, she tried to fix it, and she told the truth." Ellie blinked. She hadn't known he knew. "I checked the logs myself last night," he added, eyes never leaving hers. "If you want someone to blame, blame me for not reviewing the document before it went out. But don't blame her." Lucille raised her chin. "Henry." He held up a hand, not disrespectfully, just final. "There's something you don't understand," he said, his voice deepening with something that felt heavier than the room itself. His gaze shifted to the window, where Charleston spread out in golden morning light, the way people love to photograph it, soft focus, historic charm. But Henry's eyes weren't admiring the view. They were looking back somewhere years away. When Rebecca died, he began. I didn't want to speak to anyone for months. People gave me flowers, condolences, space, but I felt like I was underwater. I walked through this office like a shadow of someone who used to care. Lucille's face softened, just slightly. I didn't talk. He continued. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat much, just existed. Until one morning, there was a cup of coffee on my desk, black, no sugar, just how I liked it. No note, no attention drawn. Ellie froze. It was there the next day, and the day after that. And when my assistant quit without warning, someone quietly started sorting my calendar, rearranging my calls, not interrupting, just making sure I didn't drown. He turned back to Ellie now. That someone was you. Her heart fluttered in her chest like something fragile suddenly waking up. You never asked for credit, never intruded. You just kept showing up, with patience, with quiet, and over time. I realized his voice caught for a second, then steadied. I wasn't alone anymore. Lucille said nothing. Henry looked at Ellie like she was more than just part of his past. She was the reason he had one. She's the reason I'm still standing, he said, plainly, without shame. And then he said it. 4 words that made Ellie's pulse stop, mid-beat. 4 words that would ripple far beyond this room. I want to marry her. The silence was instant, heavy, electric. Even the receptionist outside seemed to hold her breath. Lucille blinked. Once. Twice. Ellie's lips parted, but no sound came out. She wasn't even sure she was breathing. Henry didn't look at his mother now, only at her. And when he stepped closer, she didn't move, couldn't. She was a woman made of stillness and disbelief. And then he kissed her. It wasn't hurried. It wasn't desperate. And it certainly wasn't rehearsed. It was the kind of kiss that didn't need to ask for permission because it had been waiting patiently for years, perhaps for the moment when words no longer sufficed. Henry kissed her like he wasn't afraid of what anyone would say, like he knew exactly what he wanted. Ellie stood there, hand still holding her resignation letter, unsure of whether to let it go or hold tighter. When he pulled back, his eyes lingered on hers. I'm sorry if that was too much, he said gently. She didn't answer. Not because she was upset, but because she wasn't sure any part of this was real. Lucille stood still, arms folded, her eyes unreadable. Ellie, slowly, turned back toward the table, her feet somehow finding the strength to move. She laid the letter down carefully, like setting down a memory, and whispered, "Excuse me." Her voice was steady, but her chest wasn't. She walked out of the boardroom in a daze, her steps silent on the carpeted floor. The world around her blurred like a dream she hadn't expected to wake up in. The elevator door opened just as she reached it. She stepped in, pressed G, leaned back, and only then did she allow herself to exhale. Her hands were trembling, her cheeks flushed, her heartbeat loud enough to fill the whole small space. What had just happened? She had come up expecting a termination. Instead, she had become part of someone's declaration. The doors closed, and as the elevator descended floor by floor, her thought stayed behind on the man in the gray suit, the one who had kissed her in front of his mother and said something impossible, something dangerous, something she hadn't dared to imagine. The first headline didn't use her name, but the second one did, and the third made sure everyone knew where she lived. It started with whispers. A few glances in the hallway, an awkward silence when she entered the break room, a conversation that stopped a second too late. Ellie thought she could live with that. After all, whispers never lasted long. She had learned that much in life. But by mid-morning Tuesday, it wasn't whispers anymore. It was her name printed, bolded, and dragged across a screen. Top executive caught in office affair mystery woman linked to Whitmore Empire. Shakeup, kiss, controversy, and corporate scandal. She saw the first article on her phone while waiting for the bus. Her hands had gone cold. The second headline followed an hour later. By lunchtime, someone had forwarded the link to the company's group chat. It didn't take long for people to connect the dots. A grainy elevator photo, Ellie's profile just barely visible. A reflection of Henry's gray suit. No context, no explanation. Just enough suggestion to spark a wildfire. Her inbox filled with checking-in messages. Some genuinely concerned, others thinly veiled gossip. A few colleagues avoided eye contact. Others stared longer than they should have, with curiosity that felt like heat on her skin. She kept her head down. She answered no questions. She typed as if typing faster could somehow silence the noise. By Wednesday morning, she was on the front page of 2 local digital tabloids. The photos weren't even taken inside the office anymore. One was outside the coffee shop she visited every morning. Another showed her walking toward her apartment with groceries. And then one email. No subject line, no sender she recognized. Just a single sentence. "You look tired tonight." Attached was a photo, taken from across the street, her apartment window, curtains half drawn. She was sitting on the couch, in pajamas, reading. Ellie's hands began to shake. This wasn't just gossip. This wasn't just judgment. This was someone watching her, someone who knew where she lived. What she wore at home. What time her lights went out. She stared at the screen, heart pounding in her ears. Then, quietly, she shut the laptop. By the time the sun began to dip behind Charleston's skyline, Ellie had deleted every social media account she'd ever created. She turned off her phone, drew the blinds, sat at her kitchen table in the dark with a cup of tea she never sipped. She hadn't asked for this. She hadn't planned for any of it. All she had done was show up, day after day, quiet, capable, invisible. And now she was everywhere. A knock came at her door, gentle but firm. Ellie froze. Not another neighbor. Not now. Not after everything. But when she looked through the peephole, it wasn't a stranger. It was Henry. He looked tired. He always did when he was thinking too much. His jaw was tight, his coat slightly open, a worried look buried just beneath the calm exterior. She opened the door. "Hey," he said quietly. "Did you see?" she asked. He nodded. All of it. Ellie stepped aside to let him in. He looked around the small, cozy apartment with its overworked radiator and stacks of library books on the end table. It smelled faintly of lavender and tea and the life of someone who never expected to be noticed. "I didn't mean for this," she said. Her voice was soft, almost afraid of being too loud. "I know you didn't." He looked at her directly. "But someone wants you to feel responsible. Don't let them." She walked to the couch, sat down, hands folded tightly. "There's more," she whispered. She handed him the email. His face changed as he read. The quiet kind of fury only a man like him could carry with such stillness. "Have you told anyone?" he asked. "No. I didn't know who to tell." He exhaled slowly, his hands still gripping the paper. "You're not staying here tonight," he said firmly. "Henry, you're coming with me." She blinked. "To your place just for a few days," he added. "Until we figure out who's doing this. My building has 24-hour security. You'll be safe there." But the story she started, "Let them talk," he said gently. Sitting beside her, "Let them speculate. But let me protect you. Ellie, just for a little while. Please. She looked at him. There was no pressure in his voice, no expectation, just care. She'd spent so long caring for everyone else, Grace, her co-workers, her old neighbors back in Savannah. She didn't quite know how to let someone else do it for her. But in that moment, she realized she didn't want to be brave alone anymore. She nodded slowly. All right. That night, Ellie packed one overnight bag. She took only what she needed: a few clothes, a worn journal, and a photo of her and Grace when they were younger, one of the few things no headline could ever take from her. When Henry's car pulled away from the curb, she didn't look back. But as they drove through the quiet Charleston streets, past streetlights and sleeping porches and late-night taxis, she allowed herself to breathe for the first time in days. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but tonight she was no longer alone in the dark. She had tried to live quietly, to be small enough not to be noticed. But now, the world was staring, and someone had opened a door she'd locked years ago. The apartment Henry kept on East Bay Street was quiet and warm, tucked behind black shutters and ivy-covered brick. Ellie had always imagined people like him lived in places filled with glass and steel, not soft leather couches and shelves of worn books. It was the kind of home that felt lived in but untouched by chaos. Exactly the opposite of how she felt inside. She had been staying there 2 nights now. Henry gave her space, never asked more than she was ready to share. He brought her tea, let her pick the music, left a light on in the hallway without being asked. But Ellie knew silence couldn't last forever, because silence, in her world, had always been the calm before something cracked. That morning, she found Henry in the kitchen, sleeves rolled to his elbows, whisking eggs with the kind of calm that made her chest ache. He looked up and smiled. "Did you sleep?" She didn't answer the question. Not really. Instead, she stepped into the room and said softly, "I need to tell you something." He paused, set down the bowl, waited. She didn't sit. I was 20. Grace had just graduated high school. Smart, talented. But she didn't get a scholarship, and we didn't have money. My job at the diner barely paid rent. She looked at the window, unable to hold his gaze. She was supposed to take an entrance exam for the university's merit aid. It was her one chance. But she got sick the night before. Fever. Vomiting. She could barely stand. Her voice trembled. I didn't want her to miss the opportunity, so I went in her place. Henry blinked. I wore her jacket, tied my hair the way she did. The proctor barely looked at the ID. I took the test, scored high enough for her to get a full ride. She folded her arms, hugging herself. No one ever found out. She didn't know until years later. I told myself it was just one lie, one moment, but it's the only reason she became a nurse, the only reason she has the life she does. Silence wrapped around them, thick and sharp. Henry didn't move, didn't speak. I've tried to make up for it, Ellie added. I volunteer. I keep my head down. I never push back, because I don't believe I have the right to ask for anything more. Finally, Henry stepped forward. Ellie, I know what your mother would say. She cut in. If this ever got out, if someone traced it back, do you think she'd let it slide? He didn't answer. Not because he agreed, but because he understood the weight of what it meant. Ellie, he said quietly, you were a child trying to save your family. You made a hard choice, but that doesn't define your worth. She didn't speak. Instead, she walked to the table where she'd left her phone charging overnight. A new message blinked on the screen. She picked it up, opened it. A chill ran down her spine. No words this time, just a screenshot. An image of the university records database highlighting the date of the exam. A red arrow pointed to Grace's name. Another showed the discrepancy in ID logs. And one line of text beneath it. Secrets don't stay buried forever. Ellie nearly dropped the phone. Henry was beside her in 2 steps. He read the message, jaw tightening. How did they get access to this? I don't know, she whispered. But they know everything. Henry reached for the phone, snapping a photo of the screen with his own. We'll trace the IP. I'll have my legal team investigate. This is blackmail. But Ellie didn't answer. She sat down slowly on the edge of the couch, eyes unfocused. Maybe this is what I deserve, she murmured. Henry crouched in front of her, voice firm but gentle. Don't say that. If this comes out, then we face it. She looked at him then, really looked. I won't let your name be tied to mine if it means dragging you down. I'm not worth that. You don't get to decide what you're worth to me, he said. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She hadn't cried in years, not since their mother left, and she became both parent and sister at 17. I should go, she said, standing, before it gets worse. No, she froze. I'm not letting you run. Henry continued. Not from me, not from this. I'm trying to protect you, and I'm trying to love you. The words landed between them like something final, not loud, not showy, just true. Ellie turned away, blinking back tears that didn't quite fall. I don't know how to let someone love me, she admitted. Then let's figure it out together. He reached for her hand, not grabbing, not pulling, just offering. And slowly, she took it. That night, Ellie sat alone on the balcony. The wind off the harbor was cool, brushing her cheek like a mother she never had. Below, the streetlights cast a golden glow on cobblestone paths. Inside, Henry was on the phone with his team, his voice low and steady. She wrapped her cardigan tighter. The world might still be staring, and her past might still be coming. But for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like hiding. The little sister she once protected was now the only one who could defend her. The knock on the door came just after noon. Ellie was in the kitchen, hands still damp from washing a mug, when Henry opened it. His voice lifted with surprise, then softened with something like relief. Grace, he said. Ellie's breath caught. She hurried to the hallway, towel in hand, and there she was. Grace Jennings, 24, bright-eyed, sharp-willed, and utterly unafraid, stood with a duffel bag on one shoulder and a look that said she wasn't here to play polite. Hey, Elle, she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Ellie blinked. What? What are you doing here? Grace set the bag down and turned, arms crossed. I woke up to 3 messages from old classmates asking if you were that Ellie Jennings. So I figured I'd skip the internet spiral and come in person. Her voice was calm, but there was fire beneath it. Henry offered her a glass of water. She took it, but didn't sit. I read enough to get the gist. She said, office scandal, CEO kiss, mysterious secretary with a past, and some anonymous creep trying to blackmail you. Ellie looked away, ashamed. Grace stepped closer. You didn't even tell me, Elle. I didn't want to drag you into it, Ellie murmured. I'm in it, Grace replied, firm. I've always been in it. I just didn't know how much until now. She turned to Henry. Can I speak to you alone for a moment? Henry nodded and led her into the study. Ellie stood frozen in the hall, heart pounding. She trusted her sister, but the truth she carried felt fragile, like a pane of glass someone might still shatter. 15 minutes passed. When Grace returned, she looked different, resolved. "I told him everything," she said, "what you did for me, how you saved my future." Ellie sat down slowly on the arm of the couch. "Grace, I kept quiet because you asked me to, but not anymore." Grace pulled out her phone, opened an app, typed quickly. "I wrote a letter," she said, "and I'm going to post it." To who, Ellie asked. "To everyone." She read aloud, her voice unwavering. 10 years ago. "My sister took a test in my place so I could get a scholarship. I was sick, scared, and desperate. She was 20, barely surviving herself. It was wrong. We both know that. But it came from love, not ambition. Ellie Jennings gave up her education, her chance at a future, so I could have one. If anyone thinks that makes her unworthy of respect, then maybe you've never known what it's like to survive in silence." Ellie closed her eyes. "Grace, no. It'll ruin your career." Grace smiled softly. "You gave me one to ruin. Remember." With a final glance at her sister, Grace hit post. The next 24 hours moved like wind through a field of dry grass. The letter went viral. It was reposted, quoted, stitched into videos with soft piano music and voices whispering about sisterhood, sacrifice, and the kind of love that doesn't fit headlines. Hashtags trended. Shabers stand with Ellie, Lars sisters, don't lie for fame, she saved me. Former classmates commented. Nurses from Grace's hospital chimed in. Women across the country shared stories of sacrifices made behind closed doors. For the first time since the nightmare began, Ellie's name wasn't followed by scandal. It was followed by compassion. Henry's legal team prepared statements. His PR manager adjusted press briefings. Even a few sponsors who'd quietly backed away now returned emails with cautious interest. And through it all, Ellie barely spoke. She didn't know how to hold that kind of attention, didn't know how to let people love her out loud. Grace stayed close. She slept on the pull-out sofa, made bad coffee in the mornings, told awful jokes. But when Ellie cried silently, shoulders trembling in the dark, Grace held her hand the way Ellie once held hers, a decade ago, outside the university testing center. "I'm here," she whispered. "This time, I get to carry you." But just when the storm seemed to pass, a new headline surfaced. CEO used his power to promote mistress. Internal email leaked. Henry's phone lit up first, then Ellie's, then the world's. The article came from a business gossip outlet known more for insinuation than fact, but this one hit harder because it came with screenshots. An internal email exchange, allegedly between Henry and the head of HR, recommending Ellie for a raise and title adjustment, dated 2 weeks before their kiss in the boardroom. No context, no explanation. Just enough truth to look like something worse. Within hours, the hashtag split. Some defended Ellie, others turned again. The internet had tasted redemption, and now it wanted blood again. Henry called his lawyers. Grace called it what it was, a hit piece. Ellie just stood at the window, watching Charleston's harbor shift under heavy clouds. "I thought it was over," she whispered. Henry stepped beside her. "It's not, but you're not alone in it." She nodded slowly, the hurt raw again. Outside, the city went on as if nothing had changed, but Ellie knew better. Because someone, somewhere, had decided her story wasn't finished yet. Lucille Whitmore didn't believe in weakness, and love, in her eyes, was the weakest thing of all. She arrived unannounced. Her driver pulled up to the private lot behind Henry's East Bay apartment just after sunset. The fall wind carried a chill, but Lucille's coat remained immaculate white wool, sharp collar, not a single crease. Her heels tapped crisply against the stone path as she stepped into the lobby. She didn't ask permission. The doorman recognized her. Everyone did. When Henry opened the door to find her standing in the hallway, he didn't flinch. He simply stepped aside. "Mother." "Henry." He gestured for her to sit. She did not. "I'll get to the point," she said, her voice low and precise. "This situation has gone far enough." Henry exhaled, closed the door behind her. "If you came here to insult Ellie again, I came here to protect our family name." She cut in. "And the company your father and I built from dust?" He said nothing. Not yet. Lucille's eyes narrowed. The board is losing patience. There are whispers of impropriety, accusations of favoritism, scandals that don't go away even when the woman involved has a sob story posted by her little sister. Henry's jaw tightened. Lucille stepped forward, arms folded. "I've spoken to several stakeholders. They're concerned. As am I. What do you want?" "Mother," his voice was calm, flat. "You have two options." She raised two fingers like a teacher counting out facts. "One, end this relationship. Quietly, respectfully, let her go." Henry's eyes flashed, and the other, Lucille didn't blink. "Resign as CEO." The words hung in the air like a guillotine. Henry took a step back, processing. "You'd call a vote of no confidence against your own son," Lucille didn't waver. "I'd do whatever it takes to ensure the future of Whitmore and Co." Behind the hallway wall, a soft sound, barely a breath escaped Ellie's lips. She hadn't meant to listen. She'd been walking toward the kitchen when she heard Lucille's voice. And like a child eavesdropping on grown-up arguments, she froze. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, because every word felt like a verdict being carved into her ribs. She pressed one hand gently to the wall, steadying herself. Inside the room, Lucille continued, "This company isn't a charity. It's not a romance novel. It's legacy. And no woman, no matter how well-intentioned, will be the reason it crumbles." Henry's voice remained even. "You think I'd throw away everything I've worked for over—" What a kiss. A story the press won't let go of. Lucille stared at him. "I think you're in love, and that kind of blindness is dangerous." Henry didn't answer right away, and that silence, it cracked something in Ellie's chest. Because maybe Lucille was right. Maybe she was the reason Henry was being asked to choose between love and legacy, and maybe she didn't deserve to be either. She turned quietly, tried to slip back down the hall, but before she could take 2 steps, Henry's voice rang out again. "Then do it." The silence that followed was electric. Ellie stopped walking. Lucille's voice dropped. "What did you say?" Henry's answer was quiet, but unshakable. "Call the vote. Schedule the meeting. But I'm not letting her go." Lucille blinked. "Just once." "Henry, I've spent years being the man you wanted me to be," he said, careful, contained, cold, sometimes, and it nearly killed me. He looked toward the hall, not knowing Ellie was just on the other side. "She reminded me who I am. The part I buried. The part that believes in more than profit margins and damage control." Lucille's lips tightened. "Love doesn't keep a company alive." "No," he agreed. "But neither does fear." They stood in silence. 2 generations. 2 legacies, 2 truths. Finally, Lucille adjusted her collar. Very well. She turned to the door. "I'll notify the board. A special session will be held within 72 hours. Henry gave a faint nod. "I'll be ready." She didn't say goodbye, just walked out as swiftly as she came. Later that night, Henry found Ellie sitting on the steps just outside the apartment building. Cardigan pulled tight, eyes on the quiet street. He didn't ask if she'd heard. He knew she had. "I told you I didn't want to cost you everything," she whispered. "You didn't cost me anything," he replied. She looked at him. "If you lose the company, I'll still have myself," he said gently. "And I'll still have you. That's more than I had for a long time." She blinked back tears. "You shouldn't have to choose." "I'm not," he said. "I'm claiming both." The wind picked up. Leaves rustled across the sidewalk like whispers. In 72 hours, everything could change. But for this moment, beneath the Charleston sky, they sat together shoulder to shoulder, choosing each other again. 12 chairs, 12 votes. One decision that could end everything she had left. The boardroom on the 21st floor had never felt colder. The lights were too bright, the table too polished, the air too sterile to breathe deeply. Ellie sat near the far end, not at the table, but along the wall, beside the glass, as if her presence was a courtesy, not a right. She didn't mind. She'd spent most of her life in the background, but this wasn't about comfort. This was a verdict in motion. 12 board members filled the seats, some old friends of Lucille's, others newer, more neutral, more unreadable. At the head sat Henry, calm but quiet. To his right, Lucille, immaculate as ever, her hands folded on the table like she already knew the outcome. The room was silent, until it wasn't. "Let's get to it," said a man in a navy suit. Leonard Hart, longtime board member and investor. "This isn't a witch hunt. It's a matter of governance." A woman beside him nodded. "We're not questioning your personal decisions, Mr. Whitmore, but they're bleeding into professional optics." Another added, "Perception is reality in business, and right now, the perception is that your romantic involvement has compromised hiring decisions." Ellie swallowed hard. She hadn't spoken. She hadn't even looked up. Henry sat forward. "If I may." But Ellie gently touched his arm. Just once. Then stood. She didn't know why. Exactly. Maybe it was the look in Lucille's eyes. Maybe it was the way the room tilted slightly toward accusation without ever daring to speak her name. Or maybe she was tired of being quiet. She stepped away from the wall, into the center of the room. Her voice, when it came, wasn't loud, but it was steady. "My name is Ellie Jennings," she began. "I've worked here for 6 years. I started in admin support, moved to document management. Most of you have passed me in the hallway without knowing my name. That's all right. I never needed to be noticed." Silence, but not indifference. Eyes began to shift toward her. Heads turned. Even Lucille looked, though her face gave nothing away. "I'm not here to defend a relationship," Ellie continued, "or justify emotions. I'm not here to explain away headlines, either." She looked around, slowly, met each gaze without flinching. "I'm here because the truth deserves space to stand." Just once, she paused. "When I was 20, I made a mistake, one that helped my sister get into college, one I never told anyone about until recently. It's out now, and if that disqualifies me from your respect, I understand." Her hands were clasped, but they weren't shaking. "I've worked hard every day since. I've never asked for credit. I've turned down promotions because I didn't want the attention. I stayed late when no one noticed. Showed up early when no one asked." A man near the end of the table frowned slightly, listening harder. "Everything I gave to this company, I gave quietly, because that's how I survived, not just here but in life. Her voice dipped, softer now. I never wanted to be anyone's scandal, or story, or symbol. I just wanted to matter, to contribute something that made someone else's life easier. She looked at Henry now, and when Henry saw me, really saw me, it wasn't because I asked to be seen. It was because he looked anyway. And if that's what disqualifies him as your CEO, then maybe we need to ask what kind of leaders we're really looking for. The room held its breath. She let the silence stretch. I'm not asking for anything, Ellie said finally. I'm not owed anything. I just wanted to speak while I still had a voice in the room. And with that, she sat down, back in the corner, back where she had always been. But something had changed. Not in her place, in her presence. Henry looked at her quietly proud. Lucille's lips pressed into a fine line, unreadable. Then the chairman cleared his throat. We'll proceed to vote, he said, one by one. Majority rules, one by one. The board members opened their files. One by one, they marked their choice, retain or remove. And as the ballots were collected into the center of the table, Ellie closed her eyes and held her breath. Sometimes, all it takes is one hand raised in your favor. The silence in the boardroom was not cold. It was sacred, the kind of quiet that falls when something heavy is about to land. The ballots were in, 12 slips of paper, 12 people with power, 12 small choices that could rewrite 2 lives. Henry sat still, hands folded. Ellie didn't look at him. She didn't look at anyone. Her eyes were closed, her shoulders still. She wasn't praying. She was remembering the first time she'd typed a report on that floor. The mornings she made coffee without being asked. The nights she'd turned the lights off after everyone else had gone home. The quiet things, the things no one ever saw. Until now. The chairman began reading the results, his voice steady and formal. On the matter of retaining Henry Whitmore as CEO of Whitmore & Co. He paused. 7 votes in favor, 5 opposed. A soft exhale moved through the room. Not quite relief, not yet, but the beginning of something loosening. Henry didn't move. The chairman continued. On the matter of disciplinary action against Eleanor Jennings on grounds of perceived conflict of interest and ethical ambiguity. Ellie opened her eyes. 6 votes against disciplinary action, 5 in favor. He looked up. 1 abstention. It took Ellie a second to understand what that meant. Then it hit her. No censure, no firing, no formal stain, just a line in a room full of eyes that had chosen finally to see her whole. Across the table, a hand rose. It was Arthur Brenner, the board's oldest member, nearly 80. A widower, sharp-eyed, quiet, and until now entirely unreadable. I'd like to say something, he said. No one interrupted. He stood slowly, leaning on his cane, then looked directly at Ellie. You don't remember me, he said gently, but we met once, years ago. She blinked. We did, he nodded. My son works in IT, has for 20 years. His daughter, my granddaughter, was born with a rare heart condition. There was a week when his insurance hit a wall, and we thought we'd lose her. Ellie listened, not yet understanding. He told me, Arthur said, that during that week, a woman from the admin department noticed he was skipping lunch. Quiet girl, brown hair, soft voice, said nothing, just handed him her lunch. Every day, Ellie's eyes widened. He tried to say no. She smiled, said, My sister would do the same for me. Let's pretend I'm her today. The room was still. Arthur looked around. That man stayed at Whitmore & Co. because of what this company used to be, a place where small kindness mattered, where people were seen. Then he looked back at Ellie. She reminded him of that. And today, she reminded me. He sat down. No one spoke. Not Henry. Not Lucille. Not even the chairman. Because when kindness speaks, it doesn't need to shout. The meeting ended minutes later, quietly, formally, like all board meetings do. Chairs scraped back, papers folded, people murmured things like fair outcome and let's move forward, but Ellie barely heard them. She stood near the window, hands clasped, eyes on the city. She still hadn't cried. Maybe she wouldn't. Henry joined her, not too close, just close enough. You did it, he said softly. She shook her head. No, they just finally saw. He smiled. Across the room, Lucille stood near the door, coat draped over her arm, purse in hand. She hadn't said a word since the votes were read. But as she turned to go, she paused, looked back at Ellie. And for the first time, Lucille's gaze didn't carry warning or judgment or ice. Just a nod, a small one, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A gesture not of defeat nor of approval, but of acknowledgement. That perhaps, just perhaps, the girl she once called a liability had become something stronger than even she could deny. Outside. Charleston had turned golden with the afternoon sun. Ellie stepped out of the building, her shoes soft against the concrete, her heart not racing, but resting. Grace was waiting by the steps with 2 coffees and a tired smile. Well, she asked. Ellie didn't answer right away. She just took the coffee, closed her eyes, and let the breeze brush past her like a promise. He didn't offer her a diamond. He offered her a broken house and a chance to build something that belonged to no one but them. The drive was quiet. Henry didn't say where they were going, just that it was outside the noise. Ellie didn't ask. She liked the silence between them now, not as avoidance, but as comfort. The kind of silence that says, I'm still here, even when no words are needed. They drove past Charleston's elegant facades and manicured porches, turning down roads where the pavement cracked a little, where vines crept along forgotten fences. Finally, he pulled up to a small gravel path leading to an old house, wooden, sun-bleached, weathered by time. The shutters hung uneven. The front porch sagged slightly on one side, but the way it caught the late afternoon light, it looked like something sacred trying to remember its shape. Ellie stepped out slowly. This place, she murmured. Henry didn't respond right away. He walked up the porch steps, pushed open the creaky door, and held it for her. It's mine, he said. I bought it 12 years ago, right after the company went public. Ellie looked around. The air inside smelled of dust and old wood, but there was something honest about it, like the house wasn't trying to hide what it had been through. I was going to live here, he continued, with Clara. The name landed gently. No sting, just memory. She loved the idea of restoring something broken. Henry said, we picked it together. She wanted yellow curtains in the kitchen and a reading nook by the window upstairs. He paused, then walked toward the fireplace, fingers grazing the mantel. After she died, I never came back. Ellie looked at him, soft and steady. No questions. No need to fill the silence. I almost sold it 12 times, he said. But every time I tried, something stopped me, like it was waiting for the right reason to come alive again. He turned toward her now, eyes not heavy, but full. And I think it's time this place got a new story. Ellie's breath caught. He wasn't proposing. Not in the way most people would. There was no ring. No perfect sunset. Just walls that needed mending and windows that stuck when they closed. But there was something else, something more sacred, a kind of invitation, not to a wedding, but to a life. Henry walked to the kitchen doorway and gestured toward the back wall. "That's where Clara wanted her garden to start," he said, "but I think you'd pick wildflowers instead." Ellie smiled. He motioned toward the staircase. "The reading nook's still yours, if you want it, though I imagine you'll fill it with journals instead of novels." And then he looked her straight in the eye. "I'm not asking for promises," he said, "just a beginning, a place that's ours." Ellie stepped toward one of the chipped walls, paint peeling like memories too long held. She reached out and placed her hand flat against it. The wood was rough, cold, but under her palm she felt something stir. Not the past, not regret, but possibility. For so long, Ellie had lived as a shadow, a placeholder, a woman careful not to ask for too much. She had learned how to disappear in plain sight, how to love quietly, how to survive without being seen. But this moment, this house was not about survival, it was about choosing. She turned to him, eyes soft but certain. "I'd like to paint the kitchen," she said. Henry blinked. "Yeah." She nodded. "Sunlight yellow, with lavender near the window." He smiled. She stepped closer. "And I want bookshelves, everywhere. Done. And maybe a swing on the porch," she added. "One of those that creaks a little, so you always know someone's coming." Henry grinned. "You planning to stay?" Ellie didn't answer with words. She just smiled. And for the first time, not just in this story, but maybe in her whole life, she didn't feel like someone stepping into another woman's dream. She wasn't replacing Clara. She wasn't borrowing a moment. She was here because she was chosen. They sat together on the floor of the empty living room, sun pouring through dusty glass. Henry leaned back on his elbows. "You know, we'll have to fix the plumbing." "Already assumed," she replied. "And the roof leaks." "I like rain." He laughed softly. "You're really not afraid of broken things, are you?" She looked at him. "No, not anymore." And just then, her phone buzzed. She looked down. One new message. From Lucille Whitmore. She met Henry's eyes. He raised a brow. "Well?" Ellie exhaled. Then opened it. She used to lower her eyes when someone said her name. Now. She raised her chin. The ballroom shimmered. Gold lights hung like stars from the ceiling. Gentle jazz played somewhere behind the hum of voices. Glasses clinked, laughter drifted, and everyone dressed like their lives were under soft spotlight. The Whitmore & Co. Hour annual gala had always been the event of the year, but this year it was different. This year, people weren't just waiting for awards. They were waiting for a woman who'd once been invisible, who now stood at the center of everything, behind the stage. Ellie Jennings adjusted the sleeves of her midnight blue dress. Her hands no longer trembled. Her heart no longer ran away from her. She looked into the mirror, saw her name printed on the program in crisp, gold letters, Eleanor Jennings, Chief Strategy Officer. Not +1, not scandal, not assistant. Her name, her title, her place. A soft knock on the door. Henry peeked in. He looked sharp black tux, tie slightly loose, like he'd already survived a war. In some ways, they both had. "You ready?" he asked. Ellie took one last breath. "I am." He didn't say good luck. He didn't need to. He just nodded once and waited for her to walk out on her own. When she stepped onto the stage, the crowd quieted instantly. Ellie blinked at the light. For a moment, she saw no faces, just shapes, shadows, silence. Then she saw Grace, near the back, sitting next to Arthur Brenner, who tipped his cane toward her with a wink. She saw the head of HR, the same one who'd once doubted her loyalty, now clapping with her whole heart. And in the front row, Lucille Whitmore, poised, still, but not cold. Their eyes met, and this time Ellie didn't look away. She stepped up to the microphone. No script, no notes, only the truth. I used to believe that silence kept me safe, that if I worked quietly, stayed invisible, and never asked for more, I wouldn't lose anything. But the truth is, silence steals more than it protects. I almost let it steal my voice, my name, and my place in this world. She glanced across the room. Dozens of faces, some curious, some emotional, all listening. This company gave me a job when I had no degree. It gave me a desk when I had no confidence. But what truly changed me was not the title I earned. It was the people who saw what I tried to hide. The kindness I thought no one noticed. The mistakes I thought I'd never outgrow. The quiet moments that mattered more than applause. A pause, not shaky, just full. To anyone who has ever loved quietly, fought silently, or waited in the background hoping to be chosen, I see you. She looked out, not down, because I was you, and now I carry your name with me. She stepped back from the mic, and before she even drew her next breath, applause, real, loud, rising from every corner of the room, and then one person stood up, Lucille Whitmore. She didn't speak, didn't smile. She just stood and clapped. First, longest, like she understood everything without a word. After the ceremony, Henry found Ellie near the long windows overlooking the Charleston harbor. The city lights blinked below like stars that had decided to stay. "You were amazing," he said. She looked at him and smiled, not the nervous kind, not the polite kind, the real kind. The one she'd kept hidden for so long. She'd forgotten it belonged to her. "I wasn't trying to be," she said. "I was just ready." They stood for a moment, letting the sounds of the room fade behind them. Then Henry reached out, not as a gesture of possession, but of peace. And Ellie, no longer afraid, no longer unsure, took his hand, not secretly, not cautiously, but fully, publicly, with joy that no one could twist into shame. They walked out of the ballroom, side by side, not as CEO and scandal, not as survivor and savior, just two people finally allowed to be themselves. The night air was cool and clean. Ellie leaned into Henry's side as they stepped into the waiting car. As the driver pulled away, she glanced out the window, watching the city she once tried to disappear into, now shining like it had saved her. Henry looked at her and whispered, "What are you thinking?" She turned to him. "I'm thinking I'd like to hang my name on the mailbox soon." He smiled. "Yours alone." She grinned, maybe hyphenated. He kissed her hand, and neither of them looked back. Sometimes, the quietest people carry the loudest truths. Ellie Jennings reminds us that you don't need a title to have value, or a spotlight to be worthy of love. In a world that often rewards those who speak the loudest, there is quiet courage in staying kind and steady. This story is about more than love. It's about second chances, about how the right person can see you clearly, even when you've spent years trying to disappear, about how the past doesn't define us, but the choices we make in the present do. It also reminds us that dignity isn't something others give us. It's something we claim, one decision at a time. Ellie didn't fight to be admired. She fought to be honest. And in doing so, she allowed herself to be fully seen. So wherever you are in life, whether you're starting over, standing still, or silently hoping to be seen, remember this: you are not invisible. Your kindness matters, and it is never too late to build something new. Thank you for spending your time with this story. If it touched your heart, even just a little, we'd be so grateful if you could like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more quiet, meaningful stories into the world, stories that heal, connect, and remind us we're never alone. From our hearts to yours, thank you for listening.